Welcome to Orbitals, an Astrology Podcast. I'm your host, William Holloway, and today's show is all about the third ninth house axis. With me to discuss and dissect is astrologer Natty from Natty Astrology. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I was excited about inviting you on. I've been really into just all of you post a lot on Instagram and Threads, a lot of astrology content, thoughts, what's going on in the sky. And I just see your stuff popping up all over the place on astrology threads. Everyone's sharing your stuff because you have such thoughtful insights.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I've been thinking about how like Saturn and Aries and like my fifth house, like right now is like, I just can't hold back. I have shit to say. Yeah.
Yeah, say it. If you've got stuff to say, you got to say it.
Oh, love it. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm super excited about this topic. In the past on this podcast, I've covered the 8th house and then the 12th house, and then I did the 6th house, and then 5th house, 11th house axis. So I was like, I really want to do 3rd house, 9th house. And I just seemed like the right person to talk to. So
This one is really sexy to me because I've said this before, how like the 3rd and 9th houses can tell you a lot about like how a person views the world and how they interact with the world. And also like traditionally, the 3rd and 9th houses are the joys of the moon and the sun respectively. And I think that gives a really interesting window into both what the houses mean, but also what the sun and the moon mean.
yeah, totally. Absolutely. So why don't we start with the 3rd house? Off the bat, 3rd house significations, communication, transportation, media, speech, writing, schooling, like elementary through high school. I feel it's very 3rd house. Your neighborhood and your neighbors, local travel, your local environment, and then, siblings, cousins, extended family, pretty much almost everyone except for your parents.
I feel like you covered a lot of it. I kind of feel generally like ritual, like it's the joy of the moon. So it can often be a place where you sort of like bring spirituality like down to earth. So like the spirituality, it's like the place of the goddess.
Yeah.
It also just makes me think about how it can like signify like the mind, like generally, or just like I often think about like your perceptual frame, how like it's often like your immediate environment. Both the moon and the 3rd house are sort of like the things that surround you almost. If you think of how the moon is like our most immediate neighbor, it's sort of like there's like this immediacy to the 3rd house, just like things that are like in your proximity.
Yeah.
And I feel that like your perceptual frames can also be that.
Yeah, totally. That's great. I think a big part of this really is that the moon has its joy in the 3rd. I think really gives a lot of understanding about the signification when you understand the history of the moon in astrology. And especially when you look back at like Hellenistic astrology, the Greek moon goddess, because it was Selene was the sister of Helios, the sun god. So right there, you have that like brother sister thing going on.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you think about like the moon moves through the zodiac much quicker than the sun, right? So that's like quick journeys, the sun's longer journeys. Something also that I love is that it's, Selene, the moon, is often depicted driving a moon chariot across the sky, which is very much like the chariot, the Cancer card in tarot.
Yeah, the chariot. It's funny. Yesterday I couldn't think of the name of it. I was just like, what is it? It's the Cantor card. It's the one that's very lunar. The chariot, is that right?
That's what I kept saying in my mind too. Yeah. Like, the chariot card.
Like literally like me yesterday. I couldn't think of the name of it.
Well, whenever I pull that card, it's like, oh, I'm going to be doing a lot of like little short trips around. And I did. I was like, went to the store and I was like, oh, forgot this, got to go to the other store. So like I left the house several times, just little trips, you know?
It reminds me of how like I don't know if you've read T. Susan Chang's writings on the Decans. They originally started on her blog, and then she made a book out of it called
Yeah,
36 Secrets. And in the book, she talks about like the Decan and its corresponding pip card. But then at the end of the section, she'll say like the everyday of this card. And like that makes me think about it, how the everyday of the chariot is like having to go about and like procure food and take care of the kids, do all the very cancer things.
totally. I have a few
Yeah.
of her books. Yeah, she's great. I love her.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
she's like one of the best, if not the best. Tarot, like if you really want to learn tarot in like a
Mhm.
really in-depth way, she's the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I feel that like that book, Tarot Deciphered, what she did with her co host, Mel Moline,
Hmm.
I feel that like there are some weeks where I just always just have that on hand, where I'm just always flipping through it.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely her books I reference the most when it comes to tarot stuff.
Mm, yeah. Totally.
In the Hellenistic world, most traveling done by ordinary people was to visit siblings, relatives, and
Hmm.
friends who usually lived nearby. There wasn't really a concept for long distance travel, for pleasurable vacations like we have now.
Hmm.
While taking short journeys to visit nearby relations, one passes through villages and communities in the immediate locale, exchanging news and information. That brings in the whole, communication news
Hmm.
aspect. You have like news, gossip, rumors, letters.
Hmm.
People. What's the word I'm looking for? Deliver. Taking letters from. Delivering mail from like one place to another. But then that also kind of incorporates the more modern significations of like books, newspapers, magazines,
Hmm.
telegrams, telephone, radio, TV, computers, and the internet. I think we really see the internet and social media in modern interpretations of the third house as well.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I was going through, I think, Demetra George's Ancient Astrology Volume 2, which is a book about the houses.
Yes.
And
The best book
and
about the houses, I think.
it's so good. It's so comprehensive. And the name is like really misleading because it goes through the entire tradition up until the modern era to talk about the houses. It's so good. It's so comprehensive. It's like super thick.
Yeah.
I have it right over here.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Gorgeous. Yeah, and it's interesting, like when the rule changes, like how we bring in all of these like significations. And listening to you talk, like I can't help but think about like opposing, how it opposes the ninth house. So I think
Mhm.
that like when we get into the ninth house, we'll get into like a little bit more clarity about like where everything stands and like what precisely, like what kind of communication, like what kind of media are we talking about? What kind of education? What kind of travel versus this kind of travel? And like the 3-9 axis really sets up like the whole range of what these things can be.
Absolutely. Well, should we talk about the ninth house then?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, typical significations for the ninth house: religion, spirituality, higher knowledge, distant places, unfamiliar territory, foreign travel, multicultural interests. I think that's important too, that sometimes people
Hmm.
forget. Like, I've seen people have heavy ninth house stuff if they're like married to someone from another country or they move to another country
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
for a big part of their lives. And yeah, prophets, astrologers, oracles, divination, law, lawyers, conceptual thinking, abstract thinking is very ninth house.
Hmm. I think religion, I mean, like divination comes in, like it's almost as if like, I mean, this is where I start getting into the difference between the third and the ninth house and the idea of the sun versus the moon, and how like the sun is like sort of like the light of the divine. It's about like higher knowledge higher knowledge in the sense of like something that comes from source, comes from the divine, comes from the heavens. Whereas the third house, the moon, is empirical knowledge, the knowledge
Mm.
that we get through the senses, that we get through just like going about in like our day-to-day lives. And so I was reading Demetra George talk about this, and she sort of said, like, in modern astrology, the ninth house is often associated with like higher education, right?
Yeah.
And the sort of like higher that we were thinking about wasn't so much like higher, the higher knowledge wasn't so much higher education. It means higher knowledge, that is the divine cognition, or like knowledge from above, you know?
Yeah.
But then she like sort of like wove this connection between all of this by saying that like, well, institutions of higher learning throughout history, they've always been done through like religious orders, through like monastic communities, or like through the church or something like that. So there is this like interwovenness of like higher learning and the sort of like divine knowledge. But it also makes me think about how the ninth house is like philosophy, something that's like a little bit more elevated, you know?
Yeah. That's a good way
Um,
of putting it.
and I mean, you just think about like the spheres, like the the celestial spheres, the sun is above the moon, you know? And so we get these dynamics of like higher and lower going on. I think you were talking about people who have like ninth house significations, and I think of one of my best friends.
Oh, okay.
And we went to like high school and college together. And like, this is somebody who, like, growing up, like, their family would like go to Europe to like visit relatives.
Mm.
And like, this is somebody who ended up like settling in Canada, becoming a citizen, to be a professor and scholar of religion and history. So the moving abroad, the writing about religion and history,
It's all
working in
there.
institutions of higher learning, and like every summer he always goes abroad. And like right now, like he's in Greece. Like he just posted like from like Delphi, you know.
Yeah. That's
so
amazing.
so it's like he's a ninth houser. So his ascendant ruler is in the ninth house. So
Mm.
is his sun. So like there's
Goodness.
like he has that rejoicing sun, but also he has the ascendant ruler. He's a Virgo rising. So he has
Okay.
Mercury in Taurus in the ninth house. So it's
Amazing.
just like everything is all there.
It's all there. I
It's
love
all there.
astrology.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, it's so good. It's so good. It's so
So
good.
good. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Understanding the sun and the moon in astrology helps you understand the third of the ninth house too, right?
Mhm.
Like you think about the moon as the closest connection to Earth. It's like our earthly instincts, the things that are like related to what's in front of us. And then the sun is like this higher, it's like our spirit. It's like what we strive for, this thing that is bigger than us, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, totally. It makes me think about Kira Ryberg said something that's like interesting about the two houses. And she weaves together the sun and the moon, the lots of spirit and lots of fortune, and these two houses. And so the lot of fortune is the moon's lot, right?
Yeah.
And so the lot of fortune often represents like circumstances, just like the things that happen to you, you know?
Hmm.
It can represent like the body, just like the moon represents the body. And like oftentimes like your body is due to like your generic inheritance. And like we don't have any control over the fact that like our circumstances and like the fact that we'll die, and like we don't have often control over like our health and illness and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So, and that's sort of like what the moon represents. That's what the lot of fortune represents. The lot of fortune, as she likes to say, is the cards that you are dealt.
Yes.
And the lot of spirit, on the other hand, which is associated with the sun, is how you play the cards. It's about like the self-directed volitional action that often is in response to circumstances, but it's also connected with spirit. And like the spirit in some ways is like this incorruptible thing that isn't like subject to like circumstances and like the waxing and waning of fortune in some ways. It's just sort of like your solid core that you carry with you. And she ended up relating this to the houses, whereas like the third house often indicates like your place of origin, right? It often
Mhm.
represents your neighborhood, your family, your siblings. You're just sort of born into all that, right?
Yeah.
And your early education, like early education is compulsory. Like you don't have any choice. But like
Totally.
the ninth house is often about like you choosing to take this path. And like the sun is like this thing where like it's incorruptible, it's steady, it moves at a steady rhythm, and it is the most like reliable, solid thing in the sky. It doesn't go retrograde.
Right.
It moves at the same rate every day. And in that sense, just as like the sun moves across the ecliptic, it often represents like this sort of like self-directed path that like we make. It's often like associated with sovereignty.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that like I didn't mention, I don't know if we got into it or if you mentioned it, was that like the ninth house is associated with law.
Yes.
And that is sort of like complicated to me
Mhm.
because Demetra George said that that is something that's a little bit later on in the tradition. You don't see it in like ancient and medieval, but more in the Renaissance, I believe.
Yeah.
And, um, but it's not like it's too far removed from like the older tradition because like the sun is like associated with kings, or the
Yeah.
sun is associated with divine knowledge. And oftentimes you think of like Moses is like being blinded by the light on Mount Sinai and then being handed down this like moral law, And if the moral law is sort of like how we conduct ourselves within our neighborhood and in our day to day life, this third house thing, it's sort of received in this sort of like nine house way. Cause like the ninth house is divination. It's like receiving something, receiving these like divine transmissions.
Totally. And then also, I think it's just because, the ninth house is like when the top of the chart, but then also just the visual that kind of like the striving for the heavens almost.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's like like I've been reading about how like even though it's a cadent house, it's like falling away from the zenith, like it's still up there, and it's where the sun rejoices,
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
ninth house is up, even though it is falling away from the angle, even though it's falling away from the zenith, it is still where the sun rejoices, and it's still very much up high, and it is in that superior trine to the ascendant. So
Right.
it's like it's kind of loud. It's kind of loud. It's not an angular house, but it's kind of loud in a way.
It is. We can jump into the way the third and the ninth house, how they show
Mhm.
up. So like, I think things like when you have a perfected ninth house year or third house or transits to the third and ninth house, yeah, you see all these things pop off. I know, like, I'm in the 10th house year right now, but when I have my ninth house year, and it's interesting too because you think about the eighth house, like the eighth house can be what they call it, like the dark night of the soul, right? Where
Mhm.
we're like kind of put through the ringer a little bit, and or we're faced with death often, or
Mhm.
whether it's like actual death or metaphorical death. So that when we get to the ninth house, it can be about like having a stronger faith in something, or
Mhm.
your ideals, your even like political, this is, I bring this up, but even like political beliefs more
Mhm.
solidified, like what you believe in,
Mhm. Mhm.
during ninth
Mhm.
house year can be solidified or changed. I know like when I had my ninth house year, I found myself becoming a lot more leftist than I thought I already
Mhm.
was.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that just, it just I came out of my ninth house year with like a much stronger conviction about what I believed in, whereas I
Mm,
might have had some, not doubts, but maybe less strong opinions about certain things. After my ninth house year, I had a much stronger sense of the world around me, I think, maybe. Does that make sense?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's making me think about my last ninth house year. So I am currently in a seventh house year.
Okay.
So that began in 2025. I was last in the seventh house year and my birthday in 2013. So in 2015, my birthday is in November. So November 2015, I moved into a ninth house year.
When Trump became president.
When Trump became actually no. He became president when I was in right after my birthday.
Oh, yeah.
So I had the same birthday as Chris Brennan, November 1st, which
Oh, okay.
means that like it lands before election day, which
Right.
means that like every 4 years I do not get to enjoy my birthday because there's always a sinking sense of dread that accompanies my birthday.
Oh,
I love
lame. Oh,
that.
that sucks.
But it's like I'm a Scorpio, so like of course like I just like I'm living in a sinking sense of dread, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's part of it.
It's part of it. But yeah, so like my ninth house year story
Mm,
is it was in so it was mostly 2016. That's when I got into tarot. That's when I
okay.
first discovered tarot. And then that was my gateway into astrology. So the first time I looked at my chart was in a ninth house year. And the
Amazing.
ninth house is divination. Yeah, yeah. Isn't that cool?
That's great. I love that.
And then when I was in a third house year, that was just a few years ago because I'm in a seventh house year now. I moved and I ended up having a longer commute. And so my third house is Aquarius. And so Saturn was in Aquarius at that time. So like I ended up it just like Saturn like stretched out my commute and it like and like I moved to a place that like felt more peripheral from where I wanted to be. And it's like
Mm,
my local environment ended up feeling more like this like distance from where I want to be. Like Saturn can be like Exile and it almost kind of like felt like that. But just like my commute sort of like ended up just like being a little bit more of a drag. It ended up like being like stretched out a little bit more, you know?
yeah. That's a
So
total third house year situation.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And then another thing that happened was so I'm Sag rising, so my third house is Aquarius. Pluto is in Aquarius right now.
Right.
And so when Pluto moved in to Aquarius for good in 2024, Pluto, I often think can represent like just like the horrors, the ugly
Yeah.
underbelly of things.
Yeah.
It can be like power struggles and power jockeying.
Totally.
And so when I got into when Pluto really moved into Aquarius for good, I really started hating my commute. And like I even like modified my commute to make it more bearable. But like I drive through rural roads. And like one thing about rural roads is you have like two things. It's kind of lawless. Like
Hmm.
you're not gonna have people I rarely ever see like county sheriff or like state police like on these roads, you know? So like people will fucking ride your ass. Like like you don't you in order to like have somebody not ride your ass, you need to like at least go like 10 miles above the speed limit. But you don't always want to do that, you know?
Right.
And so like when Pluto went into Aquarius into my third house, I started feeling this like power jockeying like super palpably.
Mm,
And it was really a drag. And then like another thing that happened was I hit a deer for the first time. I'd never hit a deer.
oh, oh no.
Yeah, so like I hit a deer. Like I had to be at work at like 6:30 in the morning. So it was dark out. So it's just like the horrors of your commute. And so like what I ended up having to do was I changed my route. And I ended up like going more take the route that like is more going through town, you know?
Mm, hmm.
Because like when people go through town, they at least have to like behave a little bit more on the road.
Yeah.
And I still have these stretches where like I really have to like watch out for deer, but it like mitigated that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I,
that's it. That's a third house situation right there.
yeah,
Complete.
yeah. Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally. I think about how like the third and ninth house is cadent, about how like the ninth house is cadent. And like you talked about how like in ancient times, like people when they traveled, it was mostly like within their town and within their village. It was locally to see family. And like long distance travel, the ninth house kind of travel was like perilous. And you would only do it if you were like for like business or like for a pilgrimage,
Mhm.
or like if you like had to like up and leave your home, and like move elsewhere. And so like there was an inherent sense of like peril with it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like there's like certain things that like I can nerd out on with regard to these houses. But I guess I'll leave it at that and then we can see where we want to go.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, I was just gonna say that, things I've seen the way the ninth and third house show up, like with clients and stuff. Third, when people have third house years, it's often like maybe it's not always like a new job, but they might be like taking on new roles at work. So they're like training. There's can be a training aspect, learning some new skills in the third house. Writing, I've seen a lot of people are like that year, like if they're a writer, that's a year that they really get into writing, or maybe they get interested in writing. I've seen that a lot with people having third house years
Mm,
where like writing and journaling becomes more important,
mm,
or like learning a new language, but like not
mm,
this, but more like Duolingo, right? Like learning it on your own, like in the
mm,
car on
mm,
the way to work is very like
mm,
third house. But then like a ninth house year, I had a client who converted to Judaism. She like decided I mean, she like did the whole process, That's very
mm.
ninth house.
Yeah, totally, totally. And it's making me think about how when I was in that third house year, when when my commute got elongated because Saturn was in my third house, that was when I started writing like a weekly astrology forecast. And I started studying astrology formally. Like I started taking a course.
Hmm.
So that was also part of that story. Like I published on astrology.
Right.
I think that the major difference between traditional and modern is how the house significations are derived,
Yeah.
where like theoretically in modern astrology, you have the 12 letter alphabet. So the first house is associated with Aries, second
Right.
house with Taurus, third house with Gemini, and so on. So so with Gemini, it's the twins. So then but it's also like mercurial and communicative. So the third house is going to be that's where you get the whole thing with siblings.
Yeah.
That's where you get that. For me, I think that this whole idea of like local environment, I think that like that, for me, understanding it in terms of the moon and the joy of the moon, I think gets you a little bit more meat when it comes to thinking about that.
Yeah.
But then you have like the ninth house in modern astrology and the 12 letter alphabet is associated with Sagittarius. And so like
Mhm.
Sagittarius often has this image of like the philosopher, the world traveler. So I think via opposition to Sagittarius, you might get that dynamic of like local versus global, short
Mhm.
versus long distance travel. I don't know if there's a whole lot more to add. I often think of like the whole 12 letter alphabet thing is like a result of certain historical circumstances where the rationale behind the houses was sort of like lost in the West. And
Mhm.
then therefore people were invented a way to derive these significations. So
Right.
sometimes I do think that like the overlap can be uncanny, but I do think that like when you go back to like the more ancient understandings, then you get it like fleshed out a little bit more robustly.
Yeah, totally. I think that the modern take of, as Aries being the natural ruler of the first house or whatever, that whole setup, it does, yeah, like you said, it's a little uncanny with how sometimes it does speak to the houses, but it's also limiting. It only gets you so
Mhm.
far, right? Especially
Yeah.
when you think about like the 12th house,
Yeah.
that doesn't work at all for me.
Yeah, for
Being
sure. For
related to
sure.
Pisces. I mean, a little bit. I mean, there is 12th house stuff is people with lots of 12th house stuff can have like some psychic intuitive abilities, that is certainly there, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. That's the one that I struggle with regard to the 12 letter alphabet. But since we're talking about the 12th house, like I one thing that Kira Reiberg does that I think is really cool is that she will unpack the houses vis-a-vis the aspects that certain houses like form to like another one. So it's like
Yeah.
the ninth house is in a square to the 12th house, right?
Yep.
And so is the third house, right? So it's like sometimes the 12th house is the place where you go into like that spiritual solitude, you go into that spiritual retreat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if the ninth house is the spirituality, if it is the sort of like connection with the divine, the connection with the solar consciousness, then sometimes we have to retreat in order to do that. She also connects it to sometimes, yeah, spiritual psychosis. And like the ninth house thing, the spirituality can sort of have this sort of like idea of like getting too close to the sun and becoming like utterly deluded. And therefore you get the spiritual psychosis. And I think that like in ancient astrology, the the 12th house is the joy of Saturn, and Saturn can be isolation, and it can be like monks, it can be mystics, like people who like are secluded, you know?
Yeah.
And whereas in modern astrology, it is Pisces and it's Pisces, right? The
Yep.
12th house is Pisces. And you can kind of get that. You can kind of get like the mystical element from that, but Saturn has like the particular quality. But then you often think about how like the third house will play into this too. So like the third house is square the 12th house, right?
Yep.
And sometimes Kira Reiber gave the example of like, let's say that you're depressed or like in a funk, you know? You
Mm-hmm.
sort of like retreat and you sort of recede from your friends, your community. You don't go outside your house. You don't go about in your neighborhood, right?
Yep.
And sometimes it takes those like close friendships, the third house friendships to sort of like pull you out of that, you know? So it's kind of cool how she derives that. And then you also like gave the example of like when you go to the eighth house here, you're like in the dark night of the soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes the 12th house can be the dark night of the soul too, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
like sometimes it's like that dark night of the soul that brings us into the place of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
But also like the sixth house can represent like, which is square to both the ninth and the third house, where it's like sixth house is toil, it's illness, it's injury, it's the things that like we just sort of live with, you know, like the stuff that we have to do. And like sometimes like if you're ill and you have limited capacity, you can't really do the ninth and the third house things like studying, right?
Yeah.
But or like going about your neighborhood and like doing all those chariot things that you talked about where you like run the errands and get the food and like do all those things. But sometimes like when you have these sorts of real sobering experiences that are very like six housey, like you're sick or like you have a catastrophic injury, it brings you into sort of not like ninth house space where you get that sort of like ninth house perspective, you know, where you
Yeah.
sort of make meaning out of it. So but we can go on and on about how like all the houses connect to the other houses. And I very much recommend Kira Reiberg's guidebook on the houses because she really like goes into that like piece by piece. And that's like a core frame through which she will delineate the houses, which I think is really, really, really cool.
It is cool. And I also think it's important. I think that that method of understanding the houses and their significations goes a lot deeper than, the alphabet.
Yeah. And it sort of indicates that like the sign, the house, and the sign's ruler are all sort of the same thing, you know?
Yeah. It's something else I think about in those terms is the 11th and the 3rd making a trine. And there is There's also something very internet-y, like your internet community, friends on the internet with, astrologers, maybe, or anyone with like common
Mhm.
interests. Like there's this that like 11th house, third house relationship too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's often like friends who have like mutual interests or like mutual goals where it's not like is like intimate or like sort of like something that you fall into is like the third house. But it's like allies, comrades, colleagues, people in your network, you
Yeah.
know?
It could be also like you think about if you go to church all the time. So like
Mm,
that's your like community, right? Third house
mhm,
is the church, the 11th house is your church community. AA meetings, you go to
mm.
an AA meeting in town. Those are all your fellow AA friends or whatever you call AA
Yeah,
colleagues.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah, totally. And then it makes me think about how in AA, they often think about it, a big thing is like a higher power, your higher power. Like,
Mhm.
what's your higher power?
Right.
Ninth house,
Ninth
the
house.
sextile between the 11th and ninth, and also like your church community, ninth house, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. So it all just sort of like comes together very beautifully. Very
It
beautiful.
really does. Yeah.
Yeah,
Love
yeah.
that.
Do you mind if I like talk about like the thing that like I really nerd out about that's like really interesting to me?
Please, please do.
So I often think that the third house will tell you a lot about your personality because it sort of is the mind, it's sort of like how you view the world. And it also can reflect like this sort of like early environment that you're in. But also like you can bring in the ninth house too. So I am a Sag rising. And so the third house is going to tell you a lot about Sag rising, right? And so for the third house, for Sag, it's going to be Aquarius. And I often think about how both Aquarius and Sagittarius are like the most ideological signs, where it's like Sag is ideological in the sense that like it has this inspiring vision and it wants to be on a pulpit or a soapbox. It wants to preach. Sag can often have like this infectious enthusiasm for things. Sometimes what the Sag has to say, and I can say this because I'm a Sagittarian. I have Jupiter and Sag in the first house. Sometimes like things don't withstand scrutiny. And like I often say that like my most toxic Sagittarian trait is that I deal in these like grand generalities when like
Mm.
sometimes it's good to like get down and do that nitty gritty like empirical research, you know?
Mm.
But like Aquarius is also like kind of like ideological. And both Sag and Aquarius have the sense of like stepping back. Like they both are very big picture, whereas like Jupiter's big picture is like grand, inspiring, divinely inspired big picture. Aquarius is like the Saturnian view from a distance,
Mm.
sort of thing.
Mhm.
But like Aquarius can be sort of ideological in the sense it's like utopian, it has a vision for how things can be, you know? So it's
Absolutely.
like the Sagittarian mind is going to be Aquarian in a way, because it's going to have these ideals that are like almost utopian. And like they may not necessarily reflect like where we are in the present, but where we want to go.
Yeah.
And then with Sag rising, if you bring in the ninth house, it's Leo. And Leo is the place where like you're supposed to shine, right? In your Leo house, it's where you're supposed to shine because like Leo is the sign ruled by the sun. So Sag is a philosopher. Where else does it want to shine? Like
Yeah.
within this higher wisdom.
Yeah.
So and you can do that with like every single like sign.
It's
Like
true. Yeah.
and like I think of like Cancer rising. So Cancer rising, I don't know if you ever, of course you've met Cancer rising, but like one thing I find about Cancer rising people is that they are often very deliberate in how they speak. They
Mm.
have that Virgo third house.
Mhm.
They are often very deliberate and measured in how they speak. And Virgo is like meticulous. It's very careful.
Mhm.
But also like I know somebody who's a Cancer rising who has Mercury in the third house, like in domicile exalted. And this is somebody who likes to engineer ritual. And
Mm,
so, and so the third house is like the place of goddess, you know?
yeah.
But then for Cancer rising, it's like the ninth house is Pisces. And like Pisces is like about like the transcendent, right? And like Cancer is a sign that's sort of like Cancer is the gateway of incarnation, right?
Hmm.
So Cancer has this vibe of like, I have been plopped down onto earth and it is so uncomfortable and I need to be in my shell and I need to take care of myself and I need to maintain this like equilibrium and like this, what's the word I'm looking for? Homeostasis.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
Cancer is about homeostasis, you know, it's about memory. And like Virgo can be very attuned to like maintaining that homeostasis. Like I have a Virgo moon and I often feel like Virgo moons are like Cancerians in a way because it's like discomfort, discomfort a lot. But like Cancerians, their mind is often like attuned to like the tiniest little like disequilibrium, you know?
Hmm.
But then like Pisces is sort of like merging into the cosmic sea. So it's like a Cancer rising might have this very like grand, like almost like cosmic like worldview. And you can do this with like every single sign. Like
Yeah.
Taurus rising.
I'm a
Taurus
Taurus
rising.
rising.
That's why I bring it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to riff on, but I often think
Yeah.
about how like Taurus rising people, the way that they communicate is very gentle. Like
Hmm.
like it has to be very gentle, you know? But also like the ninth house is like practical. They have this very practical ninth house, you know, which
Yeah.
is like Capricorn. But I don't know. How do you experience this for you?
I mean, yeah, everything you just said makes a lot of sense. And you think about, I think it also thinking of Taurus rising with Cancer in the third, there's that relationship, I think, of like the moon exalted in Taurus.
Mm.
So, there are a lot of Cancerian and Taurus things that overlap. And then, yeah, that Capricorn, yeah, there's something practical about that Capricorn ninth house. Like, I think there's a natural skepticism when it comes to Capricorn. I mean, I I have to constantly like tell myself that magic is real, even though I've seen it over and over and over in my life. But there's this part of me that is always like, everything is, this basic like Capricorn kind of thing where everything we see is what we get.
Hmm.
And I know
Hmm.
that's not true. But in my day to day life, sometimes I get lost in that or caught up in that concept. Yeah, I mean, like I've seen a UFO up close. I've seen ghosts. I've seen some wild stuff in my life. I've I've seen astrology work every freaking time. Magic is real. And yet
Hmm.
I have to keep reminding myself because it's like
Hmm.
that Capricorn ninth house, like only if you see it, it's real kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, it needs to like withstand like some sort of like test, you know, like Saturn
Yeah.
is like the test, you know, Capricorn's the test. I'm wondering if like that the metaphor of like the sea goat is like important because like oftentimes you will hear that like we neglect the image of the sea goat, which can be very spiritual. It's about like emerging from a sort of like primordial waters, you know, and like climbing up, or like the waters can represent like the spiritual womb or like the womb or
Yeah.
something. And then you like go on to land. I don't know if that informs like the Capricorn spirituality, but it's like oftentimes like there's this sense of like the spirituality of Capricorn often gets like a short shrift.
Yeah.
And I wonder if like that is a Taurus rising with that ninth house, like if that is something that like really shows up, or like maybe it's like Capricorn is about like Saturn is like long periods of time where it's just like you have to climb the mountain and like
Do the work.
whatever, yeah, and it's not going to come easy, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like it's not going to feel like innate, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And it just also makes me think about like People with heavy Capricorn placements tend to be the most skeptical of astrology. You know,
Mm.
it's that earth
Yeah.
sign thing. I think there's also just like the earth sign thing about like being very much being connected to reality, but then maybe being too connected to reality
Mhm.
or whatever we think reality is. What we see is what we get.
Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, it makes me think about how like my moon, Venus, and Mars are all in Virgo, and I think that like the first half of my life, I had like a pretty like disenchanted view of the world, you know,
Hmm.
and like I still am like very like Virgoan, and I do think that like I tend to approach astrology in a little bit more like grounded way. It's like, how do I relate this to my world, you know? And like, how do I unpack this to a way that feels like it's such a touching something that's down here, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, this transit is utterly going to change your lives, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
um, but yeah, there is like a sort of like almost like disenchantment with it. But it's really funny. I was thinking about how like if you're an Earth sign, your ninth house is going to be an Earth sign. So I was thinking about like Virgo rising
Mm.
and how with Virgo rising, like Taurus is often really about like a tangible relationship to the world around you that is sensory
Hmm.
and that is grounded, is sensual, but is also like very attuned to rhythms, you know? Where
Yeah.
it's attuned to like the ebbs and flows of life. Like Taurus has a reputation of like you do your work and then you rest, you know?
Yeah.
And like if you think about like Virgo often also has that quality of like paying attention to surroundings and like paying attention to details and
Yep.
rhythms and stuff like that. And it's like the spirituality of Virgo is probably going to have that like Taurian groundedness, you know? But I
Totally.
also think about how like Virgo rising, your third house is Scorpio. So like if you think about like Virgo, there is like a depth and exhaustiveness to Virgo. Like I have like this Virgo Scorpio mutual reception with like my Mars and like my Mercury.
Okay.
And like there's often a sense with Scorpio that like you can't go deep enough, you know? And so with Virgo, oftentimes you really want to really exhaust the possibilities of knowledge for like a Virgo rising. Like there is so much overlap between Virgo and Scorpio, maybe because I experience it natally, but
I do most of my stuff is in Virgo and Scorpio, so yes, I understand.
yeah, it's like you cannot go deep enough. And it's like that's sort of like where like the Virgoan perfectionism comes from. It's because it's like you know that the well is inexhaustible, you know?
Absolutely.
But yeah, Virgo, I think does have that like scorpionic mind where just like it has a depth
Makes so much
and
sense, and then you can also think about, like, the stereotype of Virgo sometimes thinking of the negatives before the positives, you know?
yeah, yeah, totally, totally.
That's a
And
thing.
yeah, and like Scorpio often has a sense of like, I mean, Scorpio is the time of year that like comes after the harvest. And like I often think about like Scorpio kind of has a chip on its shoulder, and I can say this because I'm a Scorpio, where it feels like you just got the short end of the stick, you know?
Mhm.
And like Scorpio is often a sign that's like associated with hunger because it's like after the harvest, like Scorpio one, Austin Coppett calls it the jawbone because it's like associated with this sort of like insatiable hunger. But like Scorpio has like this deep sense of like things that are off. Like I think about when the moon's in Scorpio, it just feels like everything's falling apart, that like there's this like profound sense of entropy. And like Virgo wants to like guard against entropy, you know?
Yes. I love that. That's so true.
So like the Virgo mind sees the entropy and decay that is that Scorpio third house, you know?
I love that. I love that you brought that up. I think that's yeah. So anyone listening, like what's your yeah, what's your rising sign? Think about your third house and like how that speaks to the way you think and communicate. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Oh, I love these houses. They're so good.
Yeah, me too.
And like, and like I'm looking at your And it's funny, I'm looking at your bookshelf and I was like, is that Demetra George up there? That totally looks like Demetra
Oh
George.
yeah,
I'm
I've
just
got
like,
both of them up there.
yeah, like one has like the lighter spine and one has like the thicker, like the lighter color and like the darker
Yep,
color
there it
spine. Yep.
is.
Yeah,
Next
yeah,
to
yeah.
Chris Brennan.
Oh yeah, there it is. There it is. I love that.
Yeah.
And then I'm seeing like is that the Abu Mashar, the green book with like the
Yep.
beige book next to it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love
Yep.
it.
Yep.
I love it. The books in every astrologer's bookshelf.
As they should be, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. I love it. It's all you need, really.
It is. I know. I have a million astrology books, but my whole thing with the top shelf, and this is very Virgo of me, I'm always like like I think of like my top astrology books, the most important ones, I'm always keeping on the top shelf. But I am always auditing it. I'm always like,
Mhm.
okay, do I need to move anything now? But yeah, everything that I use the most, I put on my top shelf, and then it like this weird order to it. But
Beautiful.
yeah,
I love it. I love it. I love it. I feel like I have a Virgo stellium, but I just don't feel. I feel that like because my sun isn't there, I feel that like I am like feel like I'm a little bit more aspirational. But
I understand. I've got my Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn in Virgo.
that's a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All your diurnal babies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I'm like in the fifth house, so it's like bit of it's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah. Or I have to enjoy what I'm learning. I was not a great student unless I was really good at like art and English, because those are the
Mm.
two areas I cared about. If I care about it, then I will excel at it. But if I don't, I'm not going to do so. I might struggle.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Natty, what do you have going on? Where can people find you?
Yeah, yeah. So you can find me at Natty Astrology, NattyStrology. I think I spelled that correctly. And you can find me on Instagram and Threads at Natty Astrology. I also have a Substack, nattyastrology.substack.com. And if you go to my Substack, that's where you can book readings with me. It links to my TidyCal. You do not need to subscribe to like book a reading. Sometimes it'll prompt you to subscribe first, but I would like you to subscribe. Please subscribe.
Yeah, I love
And
your
if you go
writing.
to,
Everyone subscribe to Natty's Substack.
well, thank you, thank you. I have a Virgo stellium, so I aim for perfection. And
Mhm.
if I don't, and I am shocked when like I have things rudely show me that I'm imperfect. So it's something that I struggle with.
I
But yeah,
understand.
go to nattyastrology.substack.com. If you want to go to the book a reading page, it's nattyastrology.substack.com/readings. I offer readings at a sliding scale. So if you have never had an astrology reading or just don't have a lot of money, like come to me. I love giving readings. I really love simply just sitting down with somebody and figuring out somebody's chart. I really like to collaborate with people to like figure out like where they're at and like where they're going. But yeah, I have a whole lot of cool things lined up for my Substack content. In mid-June before the new moon, I'm going to start launching monthly forecasts at the
Mm,
new moon for paid subscribers. So get in on that. I post on Instagram and Threads daily. So,
yeah,
and I'm always on Substack. So just come nerd out. We have a lot of fun.
awesome. Yay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yay, this was a blast. Thanks so much for joining me. I think we really, if you didn't understand the third and ninth house before, I think we did a pretty good job of breaking it down. So I hope you enjoyed this, everybody. Thanks for being on, Natty, and I would love to have you on again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Invite me on. This was my first podcast ever. So
Oh,
yeah,
welcome.
yeah, yeah.
Yay.
I love yapping. I have that like Gemini seventh house. So and I have my North Node there. So it's just like, yeah, it's just yapping, 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 yap like all day. I can do it.
Love it. Yeah, I have a seventh house stellium. That's my Scorpio as well. So I love to
Yeah,
collaborate and to chat about all the things. So yeah, definitely come on again and chat astrology.
I love it. Love it. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. See you again soon.
Bye, everyone.